I'm going to surprise you.
It does a little bit.
Oh, good. I do this to a lot of people.
She does this to me all the time.
Oh, yeah. Do you remember this one moment that sticks inside of my mind that you probably have no idea what's inside of my mind? Kris, welcome back. And welcome to the team.
Hi. I know, I'm excited.
I'm so excited. You're going to be one of our coaches. And I'm really excited about that because I feel like you bring an aspect of coaching that I'm fearful of marketing for myself. But you so unapologetically do it. I remember whenever, you and I were talking about you being a coach on the team, you were like, you sighed. You didn't even talk to me about it. You went into Slack and you were like, hey, what do you think about? And you were like, the spiritual aspect. And I was like, oh yeah, fucking ride or die. Yes, bring it in.
Yeah. I mean, I don't even know what spiritual means. I just know that like when I go on the internet and I see things I agree with, it's from spiritual accounts. So I'm like, okay, I guess this is, to me, it seems like self-development, but they're so intimately intertwined.
They really are. They really are. And those moments where someone comes across your feed and what they're saying resonates with you, I think that is such a magical experience. So we could call it spiritual, magical, resonance, whatever we call it. We all know what it is.
We do.
I think. Are you excited about meeting some of your future clients?
I am.
Yeah.
I always have felt like there was some overlap in like the work that we do, just like maybe slightly different audiences. I don't even know if they're that different. Like some of the questions that I see, because I'm part of your community and I see what comes up. And a lot of the questions that I see or the questions that like you've brought up in our conversations are some of the same questions that my audience has had. So I'm now starting to think, oh, do I have more people in my audience who have been touched by infidelity than I realize, and they just haven't felt comfortable sharing it, because a lot of my work has been speaking to women who feel trapped in unhappy marriages.
Yeah.
And for a long time, people would ask, oh, what do you think about, going outside of the marriage to get like certain physical needs met? And historically, I've been like, not recommended, but hey, like
it happens.
It happens. I don't shame people that do it. You know what I mean? Because I just think that relationships are so complicated and messy, and we try to have these very strict and rigid rules around them. But like human love is such a wild animal that there's no taming it, really. No matter what kind of social constructs you have in place, people are going to connect with people. They're going to meet people that change them. You know what I mean? There was just no controlling it, really.
Yeah, the organic aspect of it. You know what I love, actually, and I would love to hear what you think about this, because a bunch of my clients will come to me and they'll be like, was it fucking fake, Chelsea? Tell me the truth. And I'm like, you experienced it. You are the person who would know whether it was real or it wasn't. Was it authentically you? What do you think whenever people want to like go straight to when something ends, they want to look at it and invalidate it and be like, oh, I was just playing tricks with my own head?
I have a lot of thoughts swirling in my mind because I feel like people will say this in my circles when they realize that somebody that they were with like kind of pretended to be someone that they weren't in a way. And they'll be like, oh, the relationship was never real. And I'm of the opinion that whatever experience you had in that relationship was real. So like, yeah, they might have been lying to you the whole time, or it may not have been ideal or whatever. But if you were having an experience of like love and it changed you in some way and it left a mark on you, then I would say it's real. And I think sometimes I almost think there's like a story at play where it's if it was real, it would have lasted longer or it would have been more perfect. And I think that really goes back to this very archaic belief that we have about relationships, that they only have meaning if they last forever. And not a lot of relationships are meant to last forever. Like none of our connections are meant to be like lifetime for them to be real. But I would say like specifically regarding an affair situation, I feel like what's really happening is, again, this larger story of whatever love happens in an affair is not real. You know, the only real love that can happen is between a married man and a woman. It's, you know, really puritanical, crazy nonsense, which a lot of it is rooted in religion and or the idea that you can't love more than one person at a time. You know, like somehow we're
Whenever people say
limited.
that, you can't love somebody that isn't your husband or whatever, and they create this thing inside of their story that they only have the capacity to love one adult. I'm like, please do not tell adult children that. Please don't tell them that I don't have the capacity. I don't even have adult children yet, but I'm like, if that were true, like, I tell my kids.
Well, I think it's because we make the mistake of assuming that romantic love is different than any other love. Mm-hmm. I mean, romantic love as it's sold to us is it's not real, in my opinion. The only difference between the love that I have for my partner and the love that I have for my friends is I have physical intimacy with my partner that I don't have with my friends. Yeah. And I share bills with him and I share a life with him. And that's about it. That's just a deeper level of being. You know what I mean? But I don't think that the core love that is there is that different. Yeah. At the end of the day, it's all the same love, just expressed a little differently. And I don't know. I think that the fact that we tend to place love on a pedestal like that is one of the reasons why we see so many issues in relationships, because we have these insanely high expectations of romance and the people that we're in romantic relationships with. Mm-hmm. You know, like, could you imagine if somebody was like, I'm only allowed to have one best friend and that best friend needs to be everything to me and they're not allowed to have other friends? And that seems crazy.
It has you operating from a place of scarcity rather than security. Like, if all of my needs can't be met by this one relationship, then, oh no, I need to cling to this relationship. I have to do everything to make sure that this relationship exists. And then nobody's enjoying the relationship.
No, God, no. I'm going to highly recommend it. It's written by a woman she's from it's called oh my God, I'm going to butcher it. That's embarrassing. It's called the Dagara tribe, and it's on the continent of Africa, and it's called the Spirit of Intimacy. Mm. And she talks about how, like, in the village that she grew up in, how they believe that romantic relationships are too big for just two people to hold. And that the whole community is actually involved in the relationship. So if there's an issue in the relationship, the community members get involved to help the two people resolve it. And they don't have divorce in her community. They don't have a word for it.
Oh my God.
And it makes you think very differently about relationships, where, like, here everything's supposed to be very secret. You're not allowed to talk to other people about your relationship, which totally perpetuates abuse, right? And
Thank you. Yeah. Hold on. Let's underscore that for a second here. The idea that you're not allowed to talk about your relationship outside of the people that exist inside the relationship only perpetuates abuse. Oh, thank you for saying that out loud. I think that was the thing that actually brought me to doing this, was when I looked around at my community and I was like, oh, these fuckers hate each other inside of their homes. Like, you really don't know what goes on behind closed doors, but you kind of have an idea when they're together outside and you see it kind of bleeding over into the outside world, and you witness it and you're like, well, fuck, I can't imagine what it's like when they're alone.
No, it's sad. I mean, talking to other people about, like, my marriage when I was in it is what helped me make a decision. And it had to be people that didn't know him, you know, because as far as everyone in our circle was concerned, he was an upstanding guy. He had integrity. And when I talked to somebody that didn't know him and just listened to my experience of him without being like, oh, I can't imagine your experience being true because of my experience of him type situation. I remember the first time somebody was like, oh yeah, that's emotional abuse, you know? And I remember just really starting to, like, question. That was like a couple months before I left him. Yeah. You know, and it was like me just in desperation being like, listen, I have this, like, thing going on that I don't know how to articulate. I don't have the words for it, but it feels wrong. And I feel like I am slowly dying in my marriage. And everyone keeps telling me it's because I'm a spoiled child who doesn't understand that marriage is hard. And what it was is I told her that he was very different around other people than he was with me behind closed doors. And I would watch him take a phone call from a friend and be this happy, jovial, like laughing person. And then as soon as he was off the phone, just this like miserable, bitter, like no warmth towards me at all. And I remember trying to talk to people about it, but they all knew him. So they were like, oh, like maybe he's like depressed and he just feels really comfortable with you. Or
they would fucking invalidate you from the very get. They would say that no, their truth was of more importance than yours.
Mm-hmm. Or like people are really, they don't like the idea that they don't see people for who they are. You know what I'm saying? And so like when it comes to, you see this a lot in conversations around abuse online where everyone's, oh, I would have been able to figure it out if they were abusive from the beginning. And it's, if it ever happens to you, let me know if you have the same opinion afterwards.
Totally.
Because like when you love people, like you don't want to assume the worst. And then it also happens like when a woman leaves somebody, or just when somebody leaves a marriage and the other person was abusive, everybody around them is, well, that's not my experience of them. So it's like they don't like that they can't catch it. It's like a very ego-driven type thing, I think. And I would say that most of the time, I just don't make any assumptions about how people behave behind closed doors. I'm always like, you have no idea.
No clue. Not
like it's
clue.
Just you two in your house. Your neighbors are far away. Like anything can happen. And the only people that know it are the two people that are there. And then it's a he said, she said situation.
Yep.
So
yeah, I really like to try to stay neutral whenever, like I had one neighbor for a while. We all kind of knew what was going on inside the household, and everyone wanted to villainize the man in the relationship. They were like, oh, he's a diagnosed narcissist. Oh, he's, all of these things. And I'm like, knowing all of that about him does not change the fact that he's likely struggling too. And we have no idea what his side of the story is. So if I sit there and I buy into the secondhand perspective or the gossip or any of that, I'm just working off of fallible information. So I really try hard to disregard it and be like, can't someone speak compassionately to both parties? I like that intimacy book though. Send it to me because
I will. It's very short.
Did you know that, what is it? To be radical, it's to go back to the root of things. And so I love the idea of going to like the outer edges of society and seeing what's happening there and learning from it. Because I'm in the matrix, man. I've got food delivered at my door. It's fucking weird.
It's just nice to go outside of your own culture and see what other people do. I'm bicultural and I'm bilingual, so I have access to, it's like being in different realities.
Spit out the other language. Don't you keep me waiting. Go ahead. Say something like, I'm Kris and I'm a new coach on the team.
No, I'm not going to do that.
Oh my God, no?
No, I
what
get
is the language?
I'll tell you my name.
Okay.
I'll tell you my full name. So it's Kristin Guðbjörg Gísladóttir Haraldsson.
Beautiful.
Beautiful.
What language is that?
It's Icelandic.
Oh, lovely.
Yeah. But being in when you're bicultural, it's almost like you're not fully in American reality and you're not fully in your homeland reality. So you're kind of like a walker between worlds in a way.
You are the actual melting pot, not America.
And it's so interesting to see people who were like born here, raised by parents who have generations of their family here. Like most of them never even think about things being any differently.
Yeah.
And it's one of the reasons why I talk about culture so much in my work, because there are a lot of people running around with beliefs that aren't even theirs.
Yeah.
It's just a story that somebody else told you about how things are. But when you start looking like overseas, my huge passion when I was in my graduate work was cross-cultural psychology. And looking at how people behave differently across the world, you're like, wow, like most of this is made up.
Oh my God.
It's very subjective and there's no right way really to do things. It's just, human beings, like you get a really good idea of what human behavior actually looks like and what is actually natural when you go outside of your own zone of knowing, if you will.
Yeah, I completely agree. That was actually what kind of propelled my worldview cracking and falling apart, and me kind of realizing that I was tethered to beliefs that were never mine to begin with. I just adopted them and said they were mine. And it was going to Asia and sitting inside of a Muslim noodle house and eating from the people who claimed a religion that my religion hated. I was taught to hate these people, but then I'm sitting there eating food that they prepared for me while I'm in a foreign land. I could not rationalize that. I was like, there's no fucking way I can hold on to this belief and receive from these people while committed to the idea that they're eternally damned for the rest of their life because of their religion. It just seems so asinine to me. Wow, we just went on a really long tangent. No, I love it. Are you kidding me? I love it. You know that I love tangents. But I also just wanted to introduce the topic of shame and its massive role within the infidelity and divorce conversation. You and I, when we started to onboard you on as a coach, you had listened to something that was mine. And you had said, wow, it really is so obvious that it's almost impossible to make a decision when you're ashamed of yourself. And so I wanted to, give you the space to go ahead and opine a little bit more on that.
Yeah. The reason why shame came up is because I watch the way that people react to your content a lot. And I think about the way that people react to my content, specifically when I talked about just divorce and how it was literally the best thing that ever happened to me. And people get really passionate about that for whatever reason. And I am always so puzzled by it because shame is such a short-sighted tool to use, and it does not result in meaningful change at all. And that's the question that always comes to my mind when I see somebody in your comment section who's, you pathetic whore or whatever. And I'm like, what is the end game? I'm like, no, really, what is the end game here? Do you actually want meaningful change, or do you just want to feel better than this person for a period of time? Because you can't have both, And so
I truly think it's just about them venting their own fucking misery into a place where they feel safe enough to vent, which I do hope that presents some type of meaningful change in the world. Because when I first, really thought through this concept, I was like, oh, we could also build a comment section where people could fight with each other in a virtual reality rather than in their real life reality, and maybe not in front of the kids. I was like, okay, you want to go fight with your ex-wife? Here's a comment section where you can do it.
A virtual rage room with your spouse.
And typically whenever they're strangers, they actually tend to de-escalate each other quite nicely eventually, if there's a willingness. But if there's no willingness, there's no hope. Yeah. But also you had your notifications up the other day and you saw hate mail come through.
I did. I was like, who's this? I'm about to ruin somebody's day. I thought it was to one of my own accounts. I'm going to go look at profiles. I'm going to see if I can track down employers.
Oh my God, so funny.
Yeah.
So funny. I usually read it in a silly voice. And then I make a joke to myself and then I move on with my day.
I just don't understand the time.
I mean, if you value your time with the level of 0, right? You're going to do
true.
0 with your time.
I guess I don't understand it because I've seen some god awful things on the internet, but never once in my life have I gone out of my way to say anything about it. I'm just like, oh, that's horrifying. And then I just
told
move
you
on.
This was all my karma for, fucking that one comment that got me blocked from David Spade. So I made one comment about his appearance and I got blocked. And then I ended up with a social media following where people comment on my appearance all day. And I'm like, oh, fuck.
It's part of the game. It really is. Especially if you're a woman.
Yeah.
It's very weird. People have been like, oh, you should get your eyebrows filled. You should contour. And I'm like, I literally don't exist to look better to you. I don't care.
I fired a client once who came on to like her third call. She's, can I tell you something? And I'm like, yeah, go ahead. And she's, would you take those ugly headphones off on that podcast? You're a beautiful girl, but the way you present yourself on screen. And I was just like, what is happening right now? And so then
yikes.
Yeah. Please don't talk to me about my appearance. I'm very insecure about it right now.
There's no need to be.
To the shame and guilt. So why are shame and guilt toxic tools that are unproductive, in your opinion?
I think shame is a tool for control. I don't think it leads to self-development. It doesn't lead to meaningful change. I think I've shared with you that in my late teens and early 20s, I struggled with addiction. And naturally, when you struggle with addiction, you do, some people, I mean, I did some horrifying things that's probably still haunt me today and to people that I love. And in order for me to actually face those decisions and take responsibility for them, I had to stop feeling terrible about myself. And as long as I felt shameful, it actually drove me further into the problematic behaviors that I was having, because shame makes you hate yourself. It makes you feel like there's something fundamentally wrong with you, which also makes you feel like there's something you can't change about yourself. So it becomes this like self-fulfilling prophecy of, well, I'm ruined anyway. I'm damaged. There's no hope for me. I'm going to keep lashing out and spiraling and do stuff that makes me feel good. And if that means stealing from somebody so I can get high that day. Right.
Yeah.
But when I was in this new environment of people who understood what I had went through, they understood that I behaved in ways that I didn't entirely understand at the time, and that I didn't realize the impact of them. They were able to compassionately guide me in that process.
They offer me grace.
Yeah. And just say like, why don't we just let go of the societal narrative for a moment that you're a demoralizing piece of shit and that there's something inherently wrong with you, and just look at you as a human being. Right. And it took me a really long time to understand why I behaved the way I did. Like, it wasn't until like my late 20s, because for years I was like, I don't know why I ended up like struggling with addiction. I've got perfect parents. And now I'm like, hold on, very different narrative that I have for myself, where I'm like, oh, like I was a young person struggling to cope with trauma and dysfunctional family dynamics and the alienation of growing up in a culture that is not mine, you know, and all of those things together.
The culmination, it's a perfect storm.
Yeah. And I feel like a lot of the same thing does happen with infidelity, right? Like when you listen to people talk about what they've learned about themselves since then, like you can't be in that space if you're in a space of shame, because learning about yourself requires like the ability to hold nuance about yourself. And you can't hold nuance if you're carrying this heavy energy of there's something fundamentally fucking wrong with me. So I don't know about swearing on here. Sorry.
Oh, but, I love swearing on here. Are you kidding me? It's one of my favorite things. You touching on that.
Yeah, we mark this for not for children. So you can say
not for children.
If you are the other woman in your relationship and you love this podcast, you would love the Other Women community. The Other Women community is a membership program designed to help other women just like you reclaim their relationship with themselves and heal from their affair. We provide a safe and supportive environment for you to open up and talk about your experiences. We give you the tools and resources you need to grow into an authentic, empowered individual. If you're ready to take the next step in your healing journey, head on over to theotherwomanandthewife.com/community to learn more about the membership and all it has to offer.
You touched on something about the whole pointing to yourself and choosing to believe that there is something fundamentally wrong, or even pointing to something in the past that you have the belief was fundamentally wrong, kind of keeps you stuck. So one of the things that I notice about you is the whole, what is the story that you're telling to yourself? Yeah. And you and I were talking, there was a book that you recommended to me, and I mentioned it on the last episode, The Heart-Centered Business. and how shame is not an emotion. It's actually a story. And so I wonder, what are the emotions that couple the story of shame so people can identify when they are living in shame?
So the way that I tend to talk about emotions, which I think is where I feel like a lot of people, if they're lucky, can arrive at that place, is emotions are a very like visceral experience, right? They don't really live in our minds. They're these very bodily experiences. Like we feel anxiety in our stomachs or in our shoulders, right? I would say that the bodily sensations that I have with shame is almost like this desire to shrink into myself, almost to disappear, this skin crawling desire to disappear into myself and not be seen, not be perceived. And I can't even accept love or grace. It's such a place of, it's very dark, and it's so isolating. And it drives, and it's almost anxiety inducing because it drives you into this state of like feeling like you have to prove that there's nothing wrong with you, right? Or you approach people with this mindset, this story of they're going to figure out something's wrong with me. So I have to like kind of position myself so I can avoid that happening. You know what I mean? Like shame is it isn't an emotion. It's almost like a monkey on your back.
Yeah.
It's like this it's just a very insidious energy to be walking around with. And you're right, it is a story.
How much of that story do you think is from an external perspective?
I think we live in a culture steeped in shame. It's everywhere. I mean, namely because, the mythology that dominates the country that we live in is Christianity, right? Or some type of organized male-centered religion. And it introduces this sort of black and white thinking, right? This dualistic thinking, which is I'm either good or I'm either bad. I'm a saint, I'm a sinner, I'm a Madonna, I'm a whore, right? And when you put people into these like frameworks of thinking, it leaves them very dysregulated and scattered. Because again, they can't hold any nuance about themselves. They can't say, oh, I'm not a bad person, but I've done, crappy things, or I've done behavior that I'm not proud of.
Yeah.
And I would probably never do it again. But I'm not going to feel bad about it because I don't deserve to feel bad for the rest of my life. Where in our culture, we treat people like they deserve to feel bad for the rest of their lives. I mean, think about the way that we treat people who commit felonies. In other countries, you serve your time, you go back into society. In our country, it's hard to get rent, it's hard to get a place to rent. It's hard to get a place to live. It's hard to get a job. You're not allowed to travel. Some people aren't allowed to leave the country anymore. Keep them down. And it's okay. Our recidivism rate is high. Like, why do you think that is? Like, they go into this really highly institutionalized, like traumatizing place. They come out and they're still down and out. And then we wonder like why they keep doing what they're doing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I tend to take the approach that most human behavior is contextualized. And we, in our country, we tend to blame individual people for their behavior, not considering the context that we find ourselves in.
Right.
I
remember reading an article that was like, stop looking at the statistics and stop looking at the past to predict the future. Look at the circumstance.
Yeah.
And that
like our past doesn't have to be our future.
Totally. And like that circumstance is often a better predictor of human behavior than anything else. I always thought that was really fascinating because I used to be obsessed with the stats and being accurate in my predictions and being able to plan, it's that hyper desire to control. But yeah, let's keep going on the whole shame culture and how it both motivates some and it freezes others. One of the topics that you and I touched on earlier this week was how infidelity is romanticized within entertainment, and you and your partner recently watched a movie together, right? Oh, wait, no, we can't talk about it. Not his favorite movie, right? We're not going to.
It's fine. No, we watched the Titanic, and he likes the movie The Notebook. And he was like, oh, this is just like a different version of The Notebook. Like this young woman who's about to marry into wealth, but she's actually in love with the broke guy. And they're so clearly meant to be, you know, and it's always a whirlwind love. You know what I mean? Like they fall in love in a very short period of time. There's chemistry, there's passion. She goes away and she can't have her comfortable life because all she can think about is the broke guy that she's not supposed to be with. And then she inevitably cheats on her wealthy fiance with the broke guy. And we cheer it on, you know what I mean? We're like, oh, like that's the greatest love story, you know, things like that. And I just find it very fascinating.
Also the assumption of competition between the men.
Oh yeah.
You know, like that she has to be with one or the other type thing. And I just think that's really weird.
It is weird.
It is. And also, you know, with Titanic, whenever I look at the story, all I can think of is that it's her desire for freedom that he innately has, because he is not confined to the roles that she plays in society.
It's a very interesting commentary on class and freedom, right? Because you want to think that she's born into all this money. She's hanging out with wealthy people. But if you look at the party that they're having upstairs, it's very like rigid. Everybody's buttholes are clenched. It's, oh my God, you know, and it's quiet and there's all these like covert passive aggressive things happening.
Yeah.
And then he takes her down where like the poor people are partying and it's a banger. You know what I mean? Like
totally.
People are dancing, they're having fun. And it makes you think about what it means to actually be free or to be happy.
I mean, I also think that like whenever you go into that area of thought, I think about how exposing yourself to different cultures also gives you that space of freedom. Yeah. That's one thing that Stan and I do religiously is we have meals with people who are of a different origin than us, because we want to acquaint ourselves with that other facet of humanity. It's the funnest for me. But yeah, she getting acquainted with a level of freedom and self-expression, ultimately, right? The dancing, the drinking on top of tables. And then she also introduces her own little area of the world by performing, what was it, ballet or something in one of the scenes. I think that like the story that they're telling is really about the shared experience that everyone gets to partake in. And it's like the love story is kind of, you know, it's the main thing that draws people in because everybody is seeking this thing that mass media is selling. But I think that the depth of it is really in that shared experience.
I was just going to say, I almost feel like it's kind of like we're being told that romanticizing love is for the movies. And then when it actually happens in real life, nobody cheers you on. But we spend like our whole life growing up watching these movies, being conditioned to think, oh, this is what love will be like. And then when it happens, it's like this horrific event and it's all hush. And it's, oh shit, in a way, I kind of feel like I'm the one who experienced the Taylor Swift song or the movie from having this
experience. You're not allowed to
actually
relate to it because of the circumstance.
Yeah. I remember just feeling, as soon as I started noticing it, it was like a cognitive dissonance. Well, no wonder I ended up in this situation. But now I'm supposed to feel like heavy amounts of shame and like never talk about any aspects that we're okay about. Because nobody can know that it's an okay thing. But we were raised watching media telling us that it was.
Yeah. Well, if it's real love, then it transcends social obligation. You know?
Oh my God.
Yeah. And in the movies, it's real love, but
I would be doing a disservice to my parents by not bringing up this little side story. So Titanic, right? I don't know when it came out, but it had to be during the throes of my own parents' affair my stepmom and my dad. And I guess when they were getting near to it's time to make a fucking decision, they would leave notes on each other's desks that said, you jump, I jump. And they were basically like, to me, I like look back at that and I'm like, motherfuckers, you guys wasted so much time waiting to jump, like looking to each other to see who was going to jump first. Do it already. But yeah, I always think about how the Titanic, like it has that personal element now because it was something that was released during the time where they were experiencing exactly what the characters were experiencing on screen.
Yeah.
It's crazy. Anyways, okay, so let's talk about shamelessness. You know, like people, one thing that I think is wild is that because I speak openly about my own experience with infidelity and I opened up the conversation, people are like, oh my God, she's completely shameless. And I'm like, I don't know that I'm shameless because I am capable of shaming myself and feeling ashamed by other people's perception, whatever, but I also know how to work through it. So I don't know that any one person, maybe in one moment you could be shameless, but what are your thoughts on shamelessness?
I think that when somebody says, oh my God, she's shameless, what they're really saying is, oh my God, she cannot be controlled.
Good.
Really?
Good.
Because it's like, I'm telling you, shame is such a tool for control. And there's been times in my life where I've almost had to adopt this attitude of, I don't give a fuck, in order to not let people control me because I just won't let it happen. I become very disagreeable very fast. And, you know, I have an incident in my early 20s where I stopped being friends with this girl. And a couple months afterwards, her ex-boyfriend and I started sleeping together. We were working together. I was going through my own long-term breakup, and it just seemed like the most convenient thing at the time. And I didn't even think about her. And she got really upset about it. And a lot of people in my community, because she was part of the community that I was in, were like, well, you have to apologize to her. You have to make an amends to her. And I was like, why do I have to apologize for something that I did with another consenting adult when she was not in my life, but she wasn't in somebody else's? And so I got to this point where people would like use it against me and be like, oh, you're a whore. And so eventually I was like, I am, you know, and I had to take the power out of it because it wasn't that I didn't feel bad. I wouldn't do that again. You know what I mean? I can understand why that was hurtful to her. You know what I mean? And I think her and I ended up having a conversation later and being totally fine. But, you know, like the whole like trying to shame me into groveling, and that's just not going to happen. You know what I mean? I can have a mature conversation with somebody about something that I did, but the moment I start to feel like I'm going to be controlled by my own transgressions, I'm not going to have shame over it anymore.
Yeah, totally. Definitely.
You know?
I remember whenever people started coming up with insults to throw at me and stuff, one of the insults was like a pick me. And I didn't even know what the fuck a pick me was, you know? And I was like, I'm a pick me, I'm a leave me out. Yeah, I'm all of it. I'm not just one thing type thing. So go ahead, call it whatever you want, but it's so much more than that. And I remember feeling very like urgent about delivering that message to people of, oh, you're a home wrecker. I'm like, I wreck homes and I build them too, motherfucker. Yeah, I'm capable of all of it. And so are you. Like
everybody is.
Yeah, being able to like see the humanity in the conversation to me was like so important. But
I really do think that everybody is capable of infidelity under the right circumstances.
You know what? I'm actually going to read you something that I wrote because I recently did an interview with No Filter, which I guess is a podcast in Australia. And what?
I said, cool.
Oh yeah. Thanks. It was kind of like a little bit of a weird podcast. I felt kind of attacked by the host, but it also was like during a weird season of my life. And she had asked me like post interview they sent me an email and they were like, we absolutely love the work that you're doing. We would love for you to do a 15-minute, an additional like record session basically. And their question was about, we've realized there are a few key aspects we'd love to capture more clearly, like a breakdown of your business and a clear definition of infidelity. Okay. So they asked me, in my mind, what the definition of infidelity is, which I thought was hilarious because you could just go and Google it, but I loved that they gave me the opportunity. Yeah. So I told them, this is what I wrote them, because people don't understand what infidelity is. Mm-hmm. At the heart of our company's mission is a profound truth. When we shine a light in the darkness, we eliminate the need to deceive. Secrecy thrives in shadows, but authenticity flourishes in the light. Our work focuses on creating spaces where people can step into that light, examining their experiences without shame and finding paths forward with clarity and purpose. Through this approach, we aim to bring humanity closer together through understanding rather than driving people apart through judgment. When we create space for honest dialogue about these experiences, we help people recognize their shared humanity rather than divide them into camps of right and wrong. This is particularly crucial because when we make relationships transactional, a matter of tallying rights and wrongs, we miss their deeper purpose. Relationships are meant to be transformative spaces where we learn, grow, and evolve. When we reduce them to scorecards of moral accounting, we lose the opportunity to participate purposefully in the profound human experience of connecting with another soul. True healing and growth come from beyond this transactional mindset to understand deeper patterns and purposes at play in our relationships. Let me break down. I don't want to read that part, but she, like the idea that infidelity is only an affair or only the sexual act. I'm like, infidelity is quite literally the lack of fidelity. And I almost guarantee 100% of relationships experience the lack of fidelity at some point in time. This idea of having a perfect relationship that doesn't experience challenging times or whatever is just wild to me. And so then you basically shame the shit out of a segment of the population who then never feels capable of being inside of their own life. Yeah. Or enjoying their own life.
God. You know, what's really funny is in my onboarding into this business, I've been confronted with how much I was resistant to calling the dynamic that I had with my current partner infidelity.
I see it all the time.
Yeah. I was like, well, and even he will sometimes be like, no, we didn't do anything wrong. Like, we were really good friends. We didn't do anything in secret. And I'm like, no, I understand. And there was no physical intimacy between us. Right. But most people with all 5 of their senses could have looked at us and been like, yeah, they're in love. Yeah. They're just not doing anything about it.
Yes.
And it wasn't until I had made a new friend. Again, I was still married at this time. She was the same friend that pointed out that I was experiencing emotional abuse. She goes, so what about your friend, Micah? And I'm like, what are you talking about? Because I was in such denial about it, right? Because I was used to just being like, no, I don't love him like that. I'm just miserable in my marriage. Like basically saying that what I felt for him was not real, right?
And validating your own experience.
Yes. And I was so used to being like disconnected from myself that it was easy for me to be in denial. Now I look back, I'm like, you foolish child, like you idiot. Of course, and I remember her being like, because I tried to set him up with her. And even it was funny because he tried to have a conversation with me where he was like, you don't want me dating your friends. And I was like, why? And he was like, really? I was like, what are you talking about? Just go out with her. Stop fucking with me.
Oh my God. I love it. I love it.
And then I remember they did go out a couple times. And I remember watching her like swoon over a text message that she got from him right in front of me. And I was like, oh, I'm in deep shit.
Yeah.
I was like, oh my God. And so it's so funny for me to look back at all like the thick walls of denial that I had around like the relationship that I had with this person.
Mm-hmm.
And so like in many ways in like the past month or so, I've been coming into this realization where it was like, no, it was infidelity. It was. I was in love with somebody who wasn't my husband, and I didn't end that friendship, and I didn't prevent it from progressing. I mean, I had my boundaries in place.
It's not even like about what you didn't do. That's where
Right.
like, I think that I've gone through the throes of understanding infidelity so like deeply that I'm like, this is just a way that we market, another way that we market to people to make them feel like shit about themselves, is introducing this idea that like having relationships outside of your primary partnership is not okay, right? And it just goes right back to that original point that you made, that wanting to control what people share with other people is just another way to keep them oppressed. And like the, you know, one of the things that strikes me about infidelity is the immediate assumption that the person who was betrayed by the person who chose to act, or who identifies with the act of infidelity, really, because that's ultimately what you feel ashamed about, is of greater importance than the other one, you know? And I'm like, no, they're both important, you guys. But like the way that the media, I think in the past / like up until this business existed, had the focal point on the person who didn't have a choice in the matter. And I'm like, you're going about this all wrong. You're not even talking to the person who doesn't feel safe enough using their own voice. You're talking to the person who is fucking blasting it everywhere and trying to create headlines that stoke a lot of negative emotion, really. Not negative, but like hostility.
You know what I found really fascinating is when I ended my marriage and I was talking to a friend of mine about it, who she knew my ex-husband and she knew my current partner. And she was like, okay, so what's happening? Is it the same stuff? I'm like, yeah, he's emotionally unavailable. Uses me as an emotional punching bag. Like he cannot be bothered to show up for the relationship. And she had the audacity to be like, well, it was because of your friendship with Micah. And I said, you know what? That's actually not fair at all. I was like, he knew about that friendship. He knew that he was in no place. He was never going to be allowed to tell me who I can and cannot be friends with. If it was that big of a deal to him, he should have left me.
Yes.
He should not have kept me in a relationship. He should not, like, I tried. And it wasn't like I tried to leave him like 4 or 5 times. And each time it was like, please, no, like, I'll be better. I'll love you better. Like, you're not even going to give me a chance. You're being unreasonable. And my part was I listened to the gaslighting, right? But at the end of it, the idea that he had the audacity to he had the right to treat me the way that he did because he had to watch me have this friendship. And I was like, that's not fair at all. I remember correcting her and be like, no, if it was that big of a deal to him, he should have left me and I would have been understanding.
Yes. Yeah. Oh.
And I still to this, like, he knew, I'm serious. He knew about my friendship with this person.
Yeah.
He knew about it. He had issues with it. Before we even got married, I was like, listen, when I was a single woman, I could do whatever I wanted. And if me being in a relationship with you means I can't do whatever I want anymore, then I don't want it.
Yeah.
And he told me he was fine with it.
Yeah.
And then he punished me for years afterwards for it, you know? And I'm like, and other people listening to this would probably be like, yeah, he had every right to do that. And I'm like, no, he probably should have just done us both a favor and left me the fuck alone.
Yeah.
You know?
Totally.
Because I tried to leave him alone. My God, so many times.
Yeah.
So many times.
Okay. So before we finish up this episode, or as we finish up this episode, I want to leave the listeners kind of on a high note. And if any of this basically has, you know, resonated with them about the topic of shame, what is kind of the first step that these people should take in facing that and taking control of it and moving themselves forward? What do you think?
I think it's important for people to know that at any point you can decide that you're not going to feel like shit about yourself anymore. And you're not going to let other people make you feel like shit either. Mm-hmm. Like, you can make that decision right now and nobody can stop you, you know? And it won't be a decision that you make one time. It will be a decision that you're sometimes making every 5 seconds or every 5 minutes or every hour, right? Or every time you hear something that makes you want to crumple into yourself, like, you can make a decision in that moment to be like, I'm not going to feel this way about this. Mm-hmm. You know, it's just a decision away. And really I don't think we remember that.
I'd say that there's no one that can stop you, but I'll add the caveat, the only person that can stop you is you. Yeah.
Yes.
So if you're committed to shitting on yourself, that, you know, you're definitely not committed to a marriage or a relationship with any external party. The only relationship you can remain committed in is the one you have with yourself.
It's true.
And so if you want those things in life, if you want the flourishing life, then I think you have to allow yourself to flourish, which means not shitting on yourself. Yeah. Well, Kris, I love having you here. I can't wait to have you here again. And I'm excited to see what your partnership inside this business produces for the both of us.
I'm so
excited about
I'm honored. Next. Thank you.
I am too, dude. I am too. I was your fan, okay? The other thing I need to tell the audience is that you have a social following of like, what is it? Like 100-something thousand? Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you've said a lot of profound things on the internet. And it was actually there was a TikTok that I had stumbled into you on, and it was you ranting about dress code policies in America and how I loved it so deeply. And we were having very similar experiences on the internet, but you had an experience before me, which was that somebody took your content and put it out on Facebook, and then people from Facebook were coming over to TikTok just to voice their opinion on your opinion, which I found that absolutely, I was like, you mean to tell me you converted somebody from Facebook to TikTok with your opinion? That's really what is at play here. And you ended up taking it down. I was like, no, keep it going. I loved it so much.
Still to this day, one of the most controversial videos I've ever made, which is basically saying that children have rights.
Yeah.
The most polarizing video I've ever made. What can you do?
Yeah, that was a good one. Yeah, you have a lot of great videos out there. I love going over to your page and just seeing what you're talking about. So I also encourage people that are listening to go and check you out. What is your handle now? You've changed it a few times.
Thriving_imperfectly. A lot of people will just look up Kris the Viking Healing Lady, which is a name that one of my followers gave me.
I love it.
Which I love. But I don't post a lot right now. I'm having a very complicated relationship with TikTok. Somebody actually gave me...
still exists.
It does. I'm more active on Instagram now. And I'm getting more active on YouTube. But yeah, there's a lot of content out there. I hate thinking about it, to be honest.
Really? I love your content. You don't have to even... I love looking at your old content too. Sometimes I'll scroll down to the bottom of someone's page just to see the evolution of them. And your stuff, one of your rants that you did that I really loved too, which I should totally close this up. I'm like fangirling, obviously, on camera. But someone was like coming into your comment section being like, basically ragging on you for, this isn't like an authentic take. It looks like you've done this a few times, blah, 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 blah. And you were like, bitch, if you think that storytellers haven't told the same story like a few times to get it accurate to their liking, you're a fucking Nimrod. And I was like, God, I love her.
It's true.
Not everything needs to be candid in order to be authentic. But get it through your head.
Nothing online is candid.
Nothing.
I mean, this conversation is happening in real time, but
yeah, it's happening in real time, but we're all aware that there's a recording device. And that's when I'm like, no, it's a fucking performance. I am aware that, and it's going to go into editing and all of that. I remember one time someone being like, you really do just turn on the camera and say whatever you think. I was like, you don't know how many times I don't turn on the camera and say what I think. But yeah, I do think that getting comfortable with the fact that it's a performance, it's an authentic performance, like feels good and right. But yeah, I hope this episode was really great for the listeners. I'm sure it's going to be one of my favorites. I'm probably going to listen to it as soon as it gets released.
Well, and just so people know, because I'm very self-conscious about this, because I've been getting feedback lately, I'm a lot nicer than I seem like in my content.
One-on-one. Oh my gosh, you're fun, because that's basically the read that people, the thing is, the people who love you will love you not despite, but because of both of those versions of you. The one that exists in intimate conversation and the one that exists as a performer on social media. Like I remember thinking that I needed to really censor myself on social media. And then I kind of had that moment where I was like, all of the pieces that I've done where I've like second guessed myself, like after I had that thought, I would go into a coaching conversation with someone and they would be like, by the way, I loved when you did this. And I was like, oh my God, I did too. But then I was really worried that I needed to take it down because a lot of other people didn't. And they were like, oh no. So like the people who truly can hear you and stuff, they're not going to change their mind about you because of something that you posted on the fucking internet for fun, you know?
It's true. Yep. Anyway, thank you both.
Yeah,
I appreciate it.
All right.
Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this podcast episode. We appreciate your support and would love to hear your thoughts on it. If you've made it this far, you're likely someone who is invested in the journey of being the other woman. We understand that this can be a difficult and complex experience, which is why we offer guided coaching to help you heal and move forward. We encourage you to explore the links in the episode description or visit theotherwomanandthewife.com/coaching to learn more about our exclusive coaching program and apply today. Thank you again for your support, and we look forward to seeing you in the next episode.